Today I'd like to continue our journey through the Gospel of Matthew in chapter 8 and talk about a very interesting passage, verses 23 to 27 of chapter 8, called The Calming of the Storm at Sea. Verse 23 says, "He got into a boat and his disciples followed him." Interesting how this is phrased by Matthew. The author says that Jesus is the one who is leading the disciples. Even at this point in his ministry, they are following him. He goes into the boat. His disciples follow him. So clearly, what Matthew is emphasizing here is that Jesus is the leader in this situation. Then in verse 24, it says, "Suddenly a violent storm came up on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by waves, but he was asleep." A very interesting situation developed here. The storm comes up. It's a violent storm, and it is so bad that the boat is being swamped. The waves are coming over, and a very difficult situation. But in the midst of this violent storm, what is Jesus doing? He's the leader. He led them into the boat. He is asleep. So Jesus doesn't seem to be bothered by the violent storm, by all the waves, the water. He's just sleeping. Interesting word also, storm. Literally, it is an earthquake. Seismos megas in Greek. And that is a very specific word. It's a word used in apocalyptic literature for the shaking of the old world when God brings in the kingdom of God. So this seismos megas, this huge quake, this huge storm, this violent storm, symbolizes something else, really. It symbolizes that God's kingdom is upon us, God's kingdom is coming, and we have to be ready and prepared for the kingdom of God. There's going to be a shaking. And of course, it's a beautiful metaphor for what happens to us, right? When we have this encounter with God, our worldview is all of a sudden very different. It could be an amazing experience in prayer. It could be a tragedy that happens that kind of shakes us up and we look at things very differently. It could be the encounter with a special person. It could be a wonderful event in our life, a joyful event that really changes our perspective on life. It becomes a seismos megas. It becomes a huge encounter, a violent shaking happens to us. And so our old world is no longer, in a way, the way we used to look at things. We no longer look at them that way because our perspective about life has changed. We look at things very differently. We've had maybe a conversion experience, a new insight into who we are, a new insight into the meaning of our life, the direction of our life, a new encounter with somebody that has changed us radically. It is a seismos megas, a huge shaking up. So this is what's happening. This violent storm, this earthquake, quite the storm. It is used, this term, by the three authors of the Synoptic Gospels, that is Matthew, Mark, and Luke, to depict the time before the second coming. So this seismos megas, when that happens, then the second coming is going to happen. It's like, wow, there's a whole different reality that we have to get ready for, the second coming of Jesus. And this is going to point ahead, really, this violent storm, to the storm that the apostles are going to experience around the passion of Jesus. So the passion just completely shakes up the apostles. They weren't really expecting this. They looked at Jesus as their leader. Now he's suffering. He's dying on the cross. This is a tremendous uh, change for them that they just were not expecting, that leaves them really devastated. It is a violent storm. And so in chapter 8 here, this violent storm that the apostles are experiencing is sort of a prefigurement of the violent storm of the passion and death of Jesus. And what do we see Jesus doing during this violent storm? He is sleeping. That's the interesting perspective, right? Uh, Sudden storms were common on the Sea of Galilee. So this is not something that would have been that unusual. Storms would come up quickly and they would end quickly. These types of violent storms. And since the apostles and many of the disciples were experienced on the waters, they knew this. But this particular storm, which is a prefigurement of the passion of Jesus, is a different experience for them. This word, this seismos megas, is also found, again, this is an interesting connection, in Matthew 27, 51 to 54. It says, "And behold, the veil of the sanctuary was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth quaked, rocks were split, tombs were opened, and the bodies of many saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming forth from their tombs after his resurrection, they entered the holy city and appeared to many. The centurion and the men with him who were keeping watch over Jesus feared greatly when they saw the earthquake and all that was happening. And they said, 'Truly, this was the Son of God.'" So here is this violent storm, this earthquake, happening to the disciples, to the people, in conjunction with the death of Jesus. Again, a similar word. So when you see these similar words and expressions, the author is obviously trying to make connections for us. We also see it in Matthew 28, verse 2. "Behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven, approached, rolled back the stone, and sat upon it." So this is the resurrection appearance. And the stone is rolled back by the angel. There was a great earthquake. Again, this would be a sign when you see a term like this. This is a sign of an amazing event that is happening. So this storm at sea, this violent storm that's shaking things up, that's changing perspectives, is meant to be an indication of what is to come in the passion of Jesus, his death, and his resurrection. When, of course, our perspectives now about Jesus and about our lives are going to be radically changed. Jesus brings us this message of the kingdom, this message of new life, this message of conquest over death, and our perspective literally becomes changed. We embrace Jesus, we embrace his path, we embrace his life, because Jesus is going to bring us now to fullness of life. So in verse 25, now that Jesus is still sleeping, it says, "They came and woke him, saying, 'Lord, save us, we are perishing.'" So these experienced sailors are upset at this. They are afraid. The storm is unlike the other storms they've experienced, because, as Matthew is indicating by the use of the term, it's the storm that is the storm of passion, of death, of resurrection. So this is new. And so Jesus, who's sleeping, they want to wake him. And it's interesting, the phrase they use, "Lord, save us, we are perishing." So it's a cry for salvation, it's a cry for grace, it's a cry for help from the apostles. So the whole experience for them at this point is an experience of changing their perspective from this nice little boat ride now to maybe we're perishing and asking Jesus for the gift of salvation.